Today, we're going to be debating one of the most iconic superheroes of all time, Batman. Batman is Bruce Wayne's dark alter ego living in Gotham City, and we're going to be debating two of the most iconic portrayals of him in cinema. That is The Batman, released in 2022, played by Robert Pattinson, and The Dark Knight, played by Christian Bale in 2008. I'm Gabe.
I'm Issa.
This is Jules.
I'm Miriam.
And personally, for me, I think The Dark Knight is better than The Batman by a lot.
I also agree. I thoroughly enjoyed The Dark Knight.
I'm definitely in favor of the Batman.
Yeah, me too. Batman is way better than Batman.
Okay, so why do you guys prefer The Dark Knight?
First off, just in terms of not even getting into the Batman at first, in terms of villains, Heath Ledger's Joker versus the Riddler, it's not even a contest. Just like the way Heath Ledger continues through the Dark Knight and twists the characters, like introduces these psychological traps, is just more entertaining in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I was just more engaged when I was watching The Dark Knight, and I did enjoy the Batman a lot. I still really enjoyed watching it, but overall, I think Christian Bale's performance and Heath Ledger's Joker, like Gabe said, and their chemistry together really helped with the character development, and I think it just made it overall more engaging and kept me more locked in.
I don't know about Miriam, but I will say that, in terms of villains, like you said, I love Heath Ledger's Joker. It's probably the best Joker out there, but I just feel like the Riddler, I like that he does more, I don't know, it's less violent, which I feel like keeps me locked in for my type of preference of movies, because, you have to actually think and pay attention. It's not all action, and, there are detective skills by Batman involved, and just the Riddler's out here exposing everything, exposing himself, exposing, all the politicians of Gotham City, exposing Batman in a way because of his involvement, and, I just really like how the Riddler brings out a different side of Batman that we haven't seen in a while.
Yeah, I agree. I can see the psychological, but I agree. I just don't love the psychological as much. I think it can be a little distracting. Yeah, it's just not my favorite. I think I like the just how it talks more about the politics, like you said, and just more about the emotions. I think it just focuses more on the moral conflicts versus the psychological aspect of the villain.
Okay, I understand that if we're talking about exposing corruption in Gotham, in The Dark Knight, there's only truly two people who aren't really corrupt, and that's Jim Gordon and Harvey Dent. And Heath Ledger's Joker, there are two entire plot points of him trying to kill Gordon and him trying to corrupt Harvey Dent, which he succeeds. He almost succeeds in killing Jim Gordon, and he fully succeeds in twisting Harvey Dent completely, where he's not as a fraction of the good man he used to be. I think that was done in a really good way, and not throughout the course of a 3-hour movie.
I think the only thing with that is that, in The Dark Knight, the way that things are exposed is that, it's a lot through violence, that's, more fighting violence, not as much so just, I don't know, the Riddler's kind of violence is, he makes all those puzzles that make you have to think about stuff and simultaneously, punishes people. But I feel like The Dark Knight already, it addresses that, everyone's kind of corrupt, except for those two people. And in The Batman, it's more of this kind of wishy-washy gray area where people know that there is corruption because obviously Batman's there, and in the beginning he talks about how people just knowing that he's there makes them afraid, but it also doesn't assume that everyone's corrupt, and people sort of trust the politicians, especially after the big when they bust the drop guy, who I can't remember his name right now, but the big crime boss who used to do all of the drugs in Gotham City, and then they took over that, and so everyone trusts the police, and so nobody knows necessarily how corrupt they are, versus in The Dark Knight, everyone kind of assumes that everyone is corrupt already.
I agree with what you guys are saying about the Batman having less violence and more detective skills. And that's one of the things I really enjoyed about the Batman when I watched it. But for me personally, I'm not really the biggest fan of action movies, but The Dark Knight still kept me engaged, which I think is more impressive, that even though it's not my kind of movie, I was still more engaged with it, even though it does have more violence, but it was still a good balance, I feel like.
I think a big part of that in The Dark Knight, during all the action scenes, the producer was so focused on not using as little CGI as possible. It's almost all practical effects, and that makes it really, really cool to look at. It makes it one for like really cool action sequences. And even though I agree it is action heavy, I think that it's all really interesting what it is action.
Yeah, I can understand that, but I also feel like the Batman uses like more cinematic shots that are really cool that I think adds to the movie versus like the violence.
That's true. I think that I can agree that the Batman is more artistic and it focuses on more like the darkness. But I just think that the dark, like I said, it's just such a long movie.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Batman is more artsy, and I admire that about it. But it was just too long for me,
Yeah.
and I agree, or I know that it was intentional. But at times, I found myself just wishing that it was a little bit like more fast paced, so it could just be over sooner.
Yeah, if you cut out all the long sweeping camera angles, all the shots of like
Something
the
in the
darkness
way.
and stuff, yeah, like
Just kidding.
if you cut out all of that, you get the same movie with like the same points that we're discussing right now. It would
I
just
think-
be a lot easier to watch.
That's what it boils down to, though, is I feel like actual like genre and like film preference is because like I definitely prefer the Batman because it's artistic and because it's a longer movie because it draws all the details out. Like in The Dark Knight, stuff happens, it's good, it's fast, it has all that action, it has all that psychological thriller aspects, but it doesn't go into enough detail, I feel like, for me, versus like the Riddler. He explains like why he's doing what he's doing. Like he has a backstory. Bruce Wayne has a backstory. Like even the crime bosses have a backstory. Like Selena has a backstory. Just like everyone has a backstory. It has time to give out all the details so that everything's there. It's beautiful. It's just it takes it slow, but in a way where you still don't really quite know what's going on, and I like that is because it's almost like you fully immerse yourself in the story versus just immersing yourself in the action.
Yeah, I definitely agree with like fully immersing yourself. Just because like you're more involved, I guess. They're like the characters come to life because it's so long, you know.
Yeah.
So.
I feel like also with that though, you have to remember that The Dark Knight is the second in its series, and Batman Begins comes first, and that explains so much of Batman's identity and him going through the stages and like crises, I guess, of what's going on with him and balancing being Bruce Wayne and being Batman. And I feel like if you go into Dark Knight with all that knowledge already, like if you already know all that stuff, it makes it a lot better, more enjoyable experience, and it can cut out the ordeal that is the Batman.
I just feel like, as someone who's watched the whole trilogy with Batman Begins and The Dark Knight and everything, and has also watched all of the Batman, that like I just like so much that the Batman just it puts all of it in the first movie because there's gonna be another one, and I just like that in The Dark Knight like you have to watch Batman Begins to sort of get all that backstory versus like the Batman just put it all in one perfectly wrapped up piece but still allowed the story to continue into future films, which is what I really like about it.
I think that being said, if you don't like look too much, if you don't care too much about the backstory and you just want to enjoy a movie, I think you can still watch The Dark Knight and enjoy it in itself.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's talk about what's really important. Robert Pattinson, Christian Bale.
Robert Pattinson, I'm sorry.
Robert Pattinson, hot. Christian Bale, hotter.
Can I talk about Ryan Reynolds for a second?
He's not part of this podcast.
Lego Batman.
So
Superior film.
I mean, it is a good movie.
If we're talking just in terms of which movie is more iconic, it's just not even close. The Dark Knight with its iconic one-liners and Joker with his why so serious.
I think that's part of just the timing, though, because The Dark Knight is from 2008. Everything from the 2000s is iconic. And I feel like the Batman has not been around enough for
Well,
it to
that's
become
true.
iconic. And it's also a different kind of movie. Like, they don't do it for, like, the one-liners, and they don't do it for, like, all of that action sequences and just the, like... They don't do it to be iconic, necessarily. They do it to expand the story and the creativity of it.
Yeah, I guess, but like when I saw The Dark Knight, I was like 5 days later, I was like, I could watch The Dark Knight again, like watch it again with a new fresh perspective, see what's going on. If I watch The Batman, I'm like, I could go another 3 years without watching that again.
Oh, I
That'd
did
be
that with
fine.
the Batman. I've seen it 3 times, or
That's
maybe 4 times
such-
now.
That's like 10 hours of your life. That's crazy.
Okay, but it's just because like each time there's something else for you to pay attention to, and especially if you know how it's gonna end with like the thing where Batman doesn't quite get the Riddler's actual plan, and then he does, and it's too late. Like just rewatching everything and knowing what's gonna happen so that you can pay attention to the more specific details is just really
Okay,
good.
well, I have like the attention span of a 12.
That's what I was gonna say. I was gonna say I
Well-
respect that so much, Jules, but me personally
Just
could
learn how to
not do
hyper-focus.
that.
I'll take. Sorry.
W. Gabe and Issa.
Yeah.
Anyways, to wrap it up, I think that both are great movies at the end of the day, and it really depends on what style of filmmaking you prefer and which is more entertaining to the individual. I will always personally prefer The Dark Knight, but I can definitely see where Jules and Miriam are coming from with the Batman.
It's definitely like personal because like if you prefer a slower, more creative movie, then I'd say that you should watch the Batman. But if you prefer action and like all that psychological thriller stuff that you mentioned, then you definitely want to watch.
Yeah,
The
as an
Dark Knight.
action movie junkie, it's The Dark Knight all the way.
Yeah.
So.
I'm not an action movie
I'm
junkie.
not either, but The Dark Knight is still a superior film.
You just think
That's
Christian
only
Bale's hot.
because Issa's crushing on Christian
Yeah.
Bale.
You're not wrong.
Anyways, thanks for watching. We'll
Thanks
see
for
y'all.
watching.
Bye.